The rain fell like bullets on the metal roof of the refugee camp, each drop echoing through the cramped shelter where Zara huddled in the corner. Her pale blue skin was covered in bruises, and her large violet eyes darted nervously toward every sound. The other refugees gave her a wide berth, their whispers following her like shadows. "Cursed child," they muttered in their various alien tongues. "Plague bringer." Zara was only 12 cycles old, barely more than a child by Caltharian standards. But she had already learned that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her people, the Caltharians, had been wiped out in the Great Plague that swept through the Andromeda sector. She was the only survivor, and everyone believed she carried the disease that killed her entire race. The Galactic Council had tried to help at first. They set up quarantine stations, ran tests, provided medical care. But as months turned into years and resources grew thin, their compassion faded. One by one, the aid stations closed. The medical teams left. The other refugees began to see her as a burden, a reminder of death itself. Now she sat alone in Outpost Kepler 7, the last stop before the lawless frontier worlds. Even here, on this forgotten rock at the edge of known space, nobody wanted her. The station commander had made it clear that her transport to the outer colonies would be the last favor anyone would do for her. "You understand?" Commander Vex had said, his insectoid features twitching with barely concealed disgust. "Once you leave here, you're on your own. The Galactic Council has done all it can." Zara had simply nodded. She was used to being alone. The sound of heavy boots on metal flooring made her look up. Through the translucent walls of her shelter, she could see the silhouette of someone approaching. Most people walked quickly past her section of the camp, but these footsteps were steady, deliberate. A human male stopped outside her shelter. Zara had seen humans before, but this one was different. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the distinctive armor of a Terran colonial marine. His dark skin bore the scars of battle, and his brown eyes held a weariness that spoke of too many wars fought on too many worlds. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for such an imposing figure. Zara stared at him in confusion. Nobody asked to sit with her. Nobody wanted to be near her at all. She managed a small nod, and the human lowered himself to the ground outside her shelter, careful to keep a respectful distance. "I'm Marcus," he said, removing his helmet to reveal close-cropped black hair. "Marcus Chen, 3rd Battalion, Terran Colonial Marines." "I know who you are," Zara whispered. Her voice was rusty from disuse. "You're the soldier who held the line at Kepler Station when the Vorthak attacked. Everyone talks about it." Marcus shrugged. "Just doing my job." He pulled out a ration pack and began opening it. "You hungry?" Zara's stomach clenched. She had eaten nothing but nutrient paste for days, and the smell of real food made her mouth water. But she shook her head. "I can't. The sickness—" "What sickness?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "The plague. I carry it. Everyone knows." "That's why—" She gestured around the empty space surrounding her shelter. Marcus took a bite of his meal and chewed thoughtfully. "You know, I've read your medical files." Zara's eyes widened in surprise. "You have?" "Part of my job. I'm supposed to transport you to Nexus Prime tomorrow." He paused, taking another bite. "According to the tests, you're not carrying any plague. Never have been." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. "That's impossible. The doctors said you were the only survivor, so you must be immune. But immune doesn't mean carrier." Marcus set down his meal and looked directly at her. "You want to know what I think happened?" Zara could only stare at him. "I think people needed someone to blame. Your whole species dies from some unknown plague, and you're the only one left? That's scary. It's easier to blame you than accept that sometimes bad things just happen." Tears began flowing down Zara's cheeks. "But the quarantine," was probably necessary at first, until they could run proper tests. But those tests cleared you years ago. The quarantine became something else entirely. Marcus reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. He activated it, and a holographic display appeared showing official medical documents. These are your real test results, not the summaries everyone else saw, the actual data. Zara stared at the swirling letters and numbers, most of which meant nothing to her. But she could see the words, "No pathogenic organisms detected," stamped across multiple reports. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because everyone deserves to know the truth about themselves." Marcus deactivated the display and put the device away. "And because I've seen what it looks like when good people get abandoned by those who should protect them." They sat in silence for a while, the rain continuing to drum against the roof. Finally, Zara spoke again. "Where is Nexus Prime?" "Frontier world. Mining colony mostly. Rough place, but the people there don't ask too many questions about your past." Marcus finished his meal and sealed the container. "It's not paradise, but it's a chance to start over." "Will you stay?" The question slipped out before Zara could stop herself. Marcus's expression softened. "My assignment is just to transport you there safely. After that," he shrugged. Zara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She should have known better than to hope. "But," Marcus continued, "I've got some leave time coming up, and Nexus Prime could use someone with military experience to help train their security forces." Hope flickered in Zara's chest like a small flame. "You would do that?" "Kid, I've spent 15 years fighting in wars that other people started. Maybe it's time I fought for something that mattered to me personally." The next morning, Zara packed her few possessions into a small bag. She had almost nothing, some clothes donated by charity organizations, a few personal items that had somehow survived the destruction of her homeworld, and a datapad containing what little remained of Caltharian culture and history. Marcus appeared at her shelter as she was finishing. "Ready?" She nodded, shouldering her bag. As they walked through the camp toward the transport shuttle, other refugees watched them go. Some looked relieved to see her leaving. Others seemed curious about the human soldier who walked beside her without fear. "Sergeant Chen!" a voice called out. They turned to see Commander Vex approaching, his multiple eyes glittering with what might have been concern. "Are you certain about this assignment? The girl is what?" Marcus's voice carried a warning that made the insectoid commander take a step back. "Well, you know the stories, the risks." "I know the facts, Commander. And the facts say she's just a kid who's been dealt a terrible hand in life." Vex's mandibles clicked nervously. "Of course. I meant no offense. It's just unusual for someone of your reputation to take such a posting." "Maybe it's time for something unusual." Marcus placed a gentle hand on Zara's shoulder. "Come on, kid. Our ship leaves in 20 minutes. As they walked away, Zara heard Vex muttering to his aide about humans and their incomprehensible behavior. She almost smiled at that. Maybe being incomprehensible wasn't such a bad thing. The transport shuttle was small but clean, designed for medium-range journeys between star systems. Marcus showed Zara to a passenger compartment and helped her secure her bag. "The trip to Nexus Prime will take about 36 hours, he explained. "We'll make one stop at a refueling station, but otherwise it should be smooth sailing." Zara settled into her seat and looked out the small porthole. Outpost Kepler 7 looked even more dismal from above, a collection of prefabricated buildings clinging to a barren asteroid like metal parasites. "I never thought I'd leave," she said softly. "Where did you think you'd go?" Marcus asked, taking the seat across from her. "Nowhere. I thought I'd just stay there until I died." She turned away from the porthole to look at him. "Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's just an assignment." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried old pain. I had a little sister once, Sarah. She was about your age when the Centauri raiders hit our colony. Zara felt her heart clench. What happened? I was off-world, serving my first tour with the Marines. By the time I got back, he shook his head. The colony defense force had evacuated most of the civilians. But Sarah got separated in the chaos. When they found her 3 days later, she was alone and terrified, hiding in the ruins of our home. Did she survive? Physically, yes. But something broke inside her that day. She never recovered from the trauma of being abandoned, of thinking nobody was coming for her. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. She died 2 years later. Took her own life. Zara reached out impulsively and touched his hand. I'm sorry. I swore that day that I'd never let another kid face that kind of abandonment if I could help it. He looked directly at her. Maybe I can't save Sarah, but I can make sure you don't end up like her. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and Zara felt the familiar sensation of artificial gravity adjusting as they prepared for departure. Through the porthole, she watched Outpost Kepler 7 shrink away until it was just another point of light among the stars. For the first time in years, she was traveling towards something instead of running away from it. And she wasn't alone. Marcus, she said quietly. Yeah? Thank you. He smiled, and for a moment the weariness left his eyes. Thank you for letting me help. As the shuttle entered hyperspace and the stars stretched into lines, Nexus Prime looked nothing like the gleaming world Zara had seen in the promotional videos back at the refugee camps. The planet was a study in browns and grays, with massive mining operations carving geometric scars across its surface. The main settlement sprawled around the primary spaceport like a living thing, all mismatched buildings and improvised architecture. Welcome to paradise, Marcus said dryly as their shuttle descended toward the landing pad. Zara pressed her face to the porthole, watching the bustling activity below. Cargo haulers moved between the landing platforms, carrying loads of precious metals and rare earth elements. Workers in environmental suits directed the controlled chaos, their movements efficient despite the apparent disorder. It's bigger than I expected, she said. About 50,000 residents last time I checked, mostly miners. But there's a decent civilian population too. Families, shop owners, service workers. Not everyone here is trying to get rich quick and leave. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thump, and Zara felt her stomach flutter with nervous excitement. After years of living in temporary shelters and refugee camps, the idea of having a permanent home seemed almost too good to be true. Marcus gathered his gear and helped Zara with her bag. First stop is the Colonial Administration Office. We need to get you processed as a resident. They disembarked into the controlled chaos of the spaceport. Zara had never seen such diversity in one place. Humans worked alongside Altarians, their 4 arms making them ideal for cargo handling. A group of silicon-based crystallites supervised the unloading of delicate equipment, their translucent bodies refracting the artificial lights into dancing rainbows. Even a few rare Vorthak could be seen, their reptilian features no longer marking them as enemies in this neutral zone. Stay close, Marcus said, noting her wide-eyed fascination. It's easy to get lost in here if you're not familiar with the layout. They made their way through the crowds toward a squat building marked with official colonial insignia. Inside, the administration office was mercifully less chaotic, though still busy. A human woman behind the main desk looked up as they approached. Can I help you? Marcus Chen, Terran Colonial Marines, escorting a new resident for processing. He handed over a datapad with their orders. The clerk, whose nameplate read Sandra Kovac, Deputy Administrator, scanned the information quickly. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Zara's species designation. Caltharian? She said carefully. I thought... The reports of their extinction were accurate, Marcus said firmly. But as you can see, at least one survivor remains. Sandra looked at Zara with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been sympathy. Well, you're certainly unique around here. I don't think we've ever had a Caltharian resident before. Zara found her voice. Is that a problem? Not at all. Nexus Prime doesn't discriminate based on species, as long as you follow local laws and pay your taxes. Sandra pulled out a new data pad and began entering information. Do you have any special dietary requirements or environmental needs? No, ma'am. Standard Class M atmosphere is fine. Excellent. Any particular skills or job experience? Zara hesitated. What could she say? That she was good at hiding? That she had become an expert at making herself invisible? I can read and write in 17 languages, and I'm good with computers. Sandra's eyebrows rose. 17 languages? That's impressive. We could definitely use someone with those skills in the communications office. She made a note on the pad. Any family or emergency contacts? Zara glanced at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod. Just Sergeant Chen for now. All right. Sandra finished her entries and uploaded the data to the Colonial database. Welcome to Nexus Prime, Zara. Your resident ID should be ready in about an hour. In the meantime, why don't you and Sergeant Chen get some lunch and look around town? They thanked Sandra and headed back outside. The settlement's main street was wider than it had appeared from orbit, lined with shops and businesses that catered to both the mining operations and the resident population. The architecture was functional rather than beautiful, but there was something honest about it that Zara found appealing. Hungry? Marcus asked, gesturing toward a restaurant with a sign advertising multi-species cuisine. Zara's stomach rumbled in response. They found a table near the window, and she marveled at the casual way different species interacted here. A human family sat at one table while a pair of crystallites shared a meal at another, their specialized nutrient solutions glowing softly in transparent containers. It's different here, she observed. How so? Everyone's just living, not afraid, not looking over their shoulders. She watched a young human child run past the window, chasing after a small alien creature that might have been a pet or a playmate. When was the last time you saw a refugee camp where different species actually played together? Marcus followed her gaze and smiled. Frontier worlds tend to be more practical about these things. When you're living on the edge of known space, you can't afford to waste time on old prejudices. Everyone has to contribute if the colony is going to survive. Their server approached, a middle-aged human man with the weathered look of someone who had spent time in the mines. "What can I get you folks today?" they ordered, and while they waited for their food, Marcus pulled out his personal data pad. "I've been thinking about what you said back on the shuttle, about wanting to contribute." "What about it?" "I did some research on the flight here. Nexus Prime has been having communication problems with some of the outlying mining stations. Language barriers mostly. The automated translation systems can handle basic conversations, but they're terrible at technical terminology and emergency protocols." Zara leaned forward, interested. "They need translators?" "More than that. They need someone who can teach the miners basic communication skills in each other's languages. Someone who understands how different species think and express themselves." The idea sparked something in Zara's chest. For years, her linguistic abilities had been just another oddity that marked her as different. But here, they could actually be useful. "Do you think they'd hire me?" "I think they'd be crazy not to. But there's something else to consider." Marcus's expression grew serious. "Teaching miners means going out to the extraction sites. Some of them are pretty remote, and not all of them are completely safe." "What kind of dangers?" "Equipment failures, cave-ins, the occasional pirate raid." Nothing a good security team can't handle, but it's not risk-free work. Zara thought about this. After years of hiding in corners and being treated like a walking plague, the idea of having a job that actually mattered was almost intoxicating. What about you? Are you really thinking of staying here? I've got a meeting with the Colonial Security Chief this afternoon. Nexus Prime has been growing fast, and they need experienced officers to train their defense forces. Marcus grinned. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on you while you're running around the mining camps. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Zara found herself studying the other diners, listening to the mix of languages and accents that filled the restaurant. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. After lunch, they retrieved Zara's new ID card, and Marcus left for his meeting with the security chief. Zara spent the afternoon exploring the town on her own, marveling at the freedom of walking down a street without people crossing to the other side to avoid her. She found a small library attached to the communications center and spent an hour browsing through their collection of linguistic databases. The selection was impressive for a frontier world, but she could see gaps where her knowledge might be useful. Can I help you with something? Zara turned to find a tall, thin woman with the distinctive, elongated features of an Altarian watching her. The woman's forearms were folded in what Zara recognized as a polite but cautious posture. I was just looking at your linguistic resources. I'm new here, and I heard you might have need for translation services. The Altarian's secondary arms gestured in what Zara knew was surprise. You speak Altarian? Your accent is quite good. Thank you. I speak 16 other languages as well. Remarkable. I'm Kes Novell, Communications Director for Nexus Prime. And you are? Zara. I just arrived today with Sergeant Chen. Kes Novell's expression shifted to one of keen interest. The Marine who's being considered for security chief? He mentioned he was escorting someone with exceptional linguistic abilities. She gestured toward her office with one of her primary arms. Would you have a few minutes to talk? They settled into Kes Novell's office, which was filled with communication equipment and displays showing the status of various mining operations. The Altarian poured herself a cup of something that smelled like cinnamon and offered Zara a glass of water. So, Zara, she began, what exactly is your experience with technical translation? Mostly theoretical, I'm afraid, but I've studied the linguistic patterns of 17 different species, including how they approach technical concepts and emergency communications. Zara pulled out her datapad and showed Kes Novell some of her work. I spent a lot of time in refugee camps, and communication failures could literally be life-or-death situations. Kes Novell reviewed the data with growing excitement. This is excellent work, very thorough. Tell me, would you be interested in a trial position? We have a situation at Mining Station Gamma 7 where communication breakdowns have been causing safety problems. What kind of problems? The station crew is mixed. Humans, Altarians, and a small group of Vorthak engineers. They can handle basic work coordination, but when emergency procedures are involved, the translation systems fail. Last week, a tunnel collapse almost became a disaster because the evacuation orders were misunderstood. Zara felt a chill at the mention of the Vorthak. They had been enemies of the galaxy for decades, only recently joining the galactic community after their defeat in the border wars. Many species still viewed them with suspicion and fear. The Vorthak miners, she said carefully. How do the others treat them? Better than I expected, actually. The Vorthak are excellent engineers, and their ability to work in high-temperature environments makes them invaluable for certain mining operations. But the language barrier creates tension. I understand Vorthak linguistic structure, but I've never actually conversed with one. That's more experience than anyone else here has. Kes Novell leaned back in her chair. Would you be willing to take a short-term assignment at Gamma 7? 2 weeks with the option to extend if it goes well? Zara's heart raced. A real job, with real responsibilities. Yes, absolutely. Excellent. We can arrange transport tomorrow morning. Sergeant Chen will likely want to accompany you, given that Gamma 7 is in a somewhat unsecured area. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt. Kes Navell, right? I'm Marcus Chen. Sergeant Chen, congratulations on your new position. I was just offering Zara a trial assignment. Marcus looked pleased but not surprised. Where to? Gamma 7. Communication issues between mixed species crews. I know the place. Good mining operation, but they've had some pirate problems lately. Nothing major, just harassment raids trying to steal equipment and supplies. Kesnavel nodded, which is why I'm glad you'll be able to provide security escort. When can you leave? Tomorrow morning works for me. Zara? She looked between them, feeling a sudden surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. After years of being unwanted and useless, she was about to embark on her first real job. I'm ready. As they finalized the details of the assignment, Zara found herself thinking the transport to mining station Gamma 7 was a rugged utility craft designed for function rather than comfort. Zara pressed her face to the porthole as they descended toward the asteroid where the mining operation was located. The surface was pockmarked with excavation sites and dotted with the geometric structures of mining equipment. Impressive operation, Marcus observed from the seat beside her. They're pulling rare earth elements out of that rock faster than most corporate mining consortiums. Zara could see the wisdom in the setup as they approached the landing platform. The asteroid was large enough to support a substantial operation, but small enough to be easily defended. Multiple mining shafts descended into its core, while processing facilities and residential modules clustered around the main administration complex. How many people work here? She asked. About 200, according to the files. 60% human, 25% Altarian, and 15% Vorthak. Marcus checked his data pad. The diversity is part of what makes this place so productive. Each species brings different skills to the operation. They docked with a gentle bump, and Zara gathered her equipment bag. In addition to her personal belongings, she now carried translation hardware, linguistic database, and communication protocols for all 3 species working at the station. The airlock cycled open to reveal a human woman in mining supervisor coveralls. She was middle-aged, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of steady gaze that spoke of years making difficult decisions. Sergeant Chen, Miss Zara, I'm Elena Rodriguez, Station Commander. She shook hands with both of them, her grip firm and welcoming. Welcome to Gamma 7. I can't tell you how happy I am to see you both. The communication problems have gotten worse? Marcus asked as they followed her through the station corridors. Much worse. Yesterday we had 3 separate incidents where safety protocols got lost in translation. Nobody was hurt, but it was pure luck. Elena's expression was grim. The automated systems work fine for routine operations, but anything involving emergency procedures or complex technical discussions becomes a mess. They entered the main operations center, where Zara got her first look at the diverse crew working together. Humans monitored excavation displays while Altarians used their forearms to coordinate multiple data streams simultaneously. In one corner, she spotted a group of Vorthak engineers huddled around a complex schematic, their reptilian features intense with concentration. There, Elena pointed toward the Vorthak group. See how they're isolated? It's not intentional discrimination. They prefer to work in higher temperatures, so they cluster near the thermal output vents. But when they need to coordinate with the other crews, communication breaks down. Zara studied the group dynamics, noting the subtle body language and spatial arrangements. What specific problems are you seeing? Technical terminology gets completely garbled, safety warnings lose their urgency, and worst of all, The Vorthak cultural emphasis on hierarchical communication doesn't translate well to human egalitarian work styles. Marcus nodded. What kind of security concerns do you have here? Pirate raids, mostly. The Red Saber crew has been harassing mining operations in this sector for months. They don't have the firepower to take over a station like this, but they've been hitting supply convoys and isolated work teams. Elena gestured toward the defensive positions visible through the operations center's viewports. We've got decent weapons emplacements, but our security team is undermanned and undertrained. I can help with that. What about immediate threats? Nothing specific, but intelligence suggests the Red Sabers are planning something bigger. They've been consolidating their forces and acquiring heavier weapons. Zara felt a chill at the mention of pirates, but forced herself to focus on her own mission. Could I meet with representatives from each crew? I'd like to assess the communication problems firsthand. Elena smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. I was hoping you'd say that. I've arranged a meeting for this afternoon. The conference room was a study in compromise. The temperature was set at a level that was comfortable for humans, but required the Altarians to wear thermal suits, and made the Vorthak slightly sluggish. The seating was arranged to accommodate different physical needs, with adjustable chairs for humans, standing platforms for Altarians, and heated benches for the Vorthak. Zara took her place at the head of the table, surprised by how natural it felt to take a leadership role. Marcus positioned himself near the door, his presence both reassuring and vigilant. Thank you all for coming, Zara began, switching smoothly between languages as she addressed each group in their native tongue. I'm here to help improve communication between your teams. The response was immediate and positive. The Altarian representative, an engineer named Vex Torkan, gestured his appreciation with all four arms. The human crew chief, a gruff man named Bob Harrison, leaned forward with interest, and the Vorthak delegation, led by Engineer Prime Stockville, hissed what Zara recognized as approval. The first step, she continued, is understanding where the current problems occur. Could each group give me examples of recent miscommunications? What followed was a fascinating insight into the complexity of interspecies cooperation. The humans spoke rapidly and casually, often using idioms and colloquialisms that made no sense to literal-minded translators. The Altarians, with their mathematical approach to communication, provided precise technical data but struggled with the emotional nuances of human safety warnings. The Vorthak, constrained by their cultural emphasis on hierarchy and formal speech, often found their carefully structured warnings ignored or misunderstood by the more casual humans. So when Engineer Prime Stockville says, I respectfully suggest immediate cessation of drilling operations, what he really means is, stop right now or you'll die, Zara summarized. Correct, Stockville hissed, his reptilian features showing what might have been amusement. Your understanding of our speech patterns is remarkably accurate. And when Bob says you might want to check that thermal reading, he's not making a casual suggestion. He's giving a direct order based on safety concerns. Bob Harrison nodded vigorously. Exactly, but half the time they think I'm just making conversation. Zara spent the next 3 hours working with each group to develop a standardized communication protocol. She created quick reference guides for emergency terminology, established clear hierarchical structures that all 3 species could understand, and designed a color-coded system for prioritizing communications based on urgency. This is excellent work, Elena said as the meeting concluded. How long will it take to implement? I'd like to spend a few days with each crew working on practical applications, maybe run some emergency drills to test the new protocols. Zara felt a surge of professional satisfaction. If everyone's willing to put in the effort, we could have significant improvement within a week. As the various crew representatives filed out of the conference room, Stackvel approached her table. The Vorthak moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, his scales catching the light in subtle patterns. "Your knowledge of our language goes beyond academic study," he said in heavily accented but clear standard. "Where did you learn to understand the emotional subtleties of Vorthak communication?" Zara hesitated. The truth was that she had studied Vorthak culture obsessively during the war years, trying to understand an enemy that had seemed incomprehensible to most of the galaxy. "I've always been interested in linguistics. Your species has a particularly complex communication structure." Indeed, most galactic species see only our warrior culture and assume we are simple beings driven by aggression. They do not understand that our hierarchies exist to prevent violence, not encourage it. "The honor protocols," Zara said, nodding. "A way of establishing status and responsibility without physical conflict." Stackvel's eyes, large and surprisingly intelligent, fixed on her with what she recognized as respect. "You understand. This gives me hope that true cooperation is possible here." After he left, Marcus approached the table where Zara was organizing her notes. "That went well. How are you feeling?" "Excited? Nervous? Useful?" She looked up at him with a smile. "This is the first time in my life I've felt like I could actually help people." "You're a natural at this. The way you handled the cultural differences, found common ground." Marcus shook his head in admiration. "I've seen diplomats with decades of experience who couldn't have done better." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the station's communications system. Elena's voice crackled over the speakers. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple contacts approaching on an attack vector. This is not a drill." Marcus was moving before the announcement finished. "Stay close to me. Emergency protocols for civilian personnel are to shelter in the central core until the all clear." But as they hurried through the corridors, Zara could see the same communication problems she had just identified playing out in real time. Human security personnel were shouting orders that the Altarian technicians were interpreting literally, while critical instructions from Vorthak engineers were being ignored because they sounded too formal and indirect. "Marcus," she said, grabbing his arm, "the communication breakdown, it's happening right now. People are going to get hurt." He paused, conflict clear on his face. His duty was to protect her, but he could see what she was seeing. "What do you need?" "Access to the station communication system. 5 minutes to upload the emergency protocols we just developed." Marcus made a decision that would have been incomprehensible to him just weeks earlier. Instead of rushing her to safety, he led her toward the communications center. "Kesnavel was right about you. You're not just a translator, you're a bridge builder." The communications center was in controlled chaos when they arrived. Technicians frantically tried to coordinate defensive measures while the translation system struggled to keep up with rapid-fire emergency communications. "Elena!" Marcus called out. "Zara needs access to the communication grid." "Are you insane? We're under attack." "Which is exactly why she needs access. The communication failures are making your defense less effective." Elena looked at Zara with a mixture of desperation and hope. "Can you really fix this?" "I can try." Zara plugged her datapad into the communication console and began uploading her emergency protocol package. "This should provide real-time translation of critical safety and tactical terminology." The results were immediate. Across the station, mixed-species teams suddenly found themselves able to communicate with unprecedented clarity. Vorthak engineering warnings were instantly recognized as urgent safety alerts. Altarian technical data was presented in terms that human operators could immediately understand and act upon. Human tactical commands were structured in ways that respected Vorthak hierarchy while maintaining operational flexibility. Through the tactical displays, they watched the Red Saber pirates approach in a loose formation of modified fighters and assault ships. The pirates had clearly expected to find an easy target, a mining station with confused defenses and poor coordination. Instead, they encountered a unified defensive response that anticipated their tactics and countered them effectively. The Vorthak-designed weapon systems fired in perfect synchronization with Altarian targeting computers and human tactical coordination. "Targets neutralized," the tactical officer reported as the last pirate ship fled the system. "No casualties on our side, minimal damage to station infrastructure." Elena turned to Zara with an expression of amazement. "In 30 years of mining operations, I've never seen defensive coordination that effective. What you did here today—" "What we did," Zara corrected, gesturing toward the diverse crew members who were now celebrating their success together. "I just helped them talk to each other." But Marcus saw something deeper in what had happened. He had watched a young woman who had been abandoned by an entire galaxy find her purpose in bringing others together. Humanity's greatest strength, he realized, wasn't their military might or technological innovation. It was their ability to see potential in others that those others couldn't see in themselves. As the station returned to normal operations, Zara found herself surrounded by crew members from all 3 species, all expressing gratitude in their own languages. The Vorthak engineers offered formal thanks with precise hierarchical acknowledgments. The Altarians gestured their appreciation with complex 4-armed patterns. The humans simply shook her hand and called her a hero. "So," Marcus said as the crowd finally dispersed, "ready to make this assignment permanent?" Zara looked around at the mining station that had become the first place in the galaxy to truly welcome her. "Actually, I was thinking bigger than that." "How much bigger?" "Elena mentioned that communication problems are common throughout the mining sector. What if we created a training program, something that could be implemented at stations throughout the frontier?" Marcus grinned. "Building bridges between species across the galaxy? Sounds like exactly the kind of impossible mission humans are known for taking on." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. But we'll need a base of operations, training facilities, qualified instructors. I know someone who might be able to help with that." Zara activated her communication device and sent a message to Kesnavel back on Nexus Prime. The communications director mentioned that the colonial government has been looking for ways to improve interspecies cooperation. As they worked together to outline their ambitious plans, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been a refugee abandoned by the galaxy, considered useful to no one and wanted by even fewer. Now she was planning to establish an institution that could fundamentally improve how different species work together. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same diversity that had made her an outcast in the refugee camps, her ability to understand and bridge cultural differences, was exactly what the frontier needed to thrive. "You know," Marcus said as they finalized their proposal, "there's something poetic about this. Humanity's first contact with most alien species came through conflict and misunderstanding. Maybe our greatest contribution to galactic civilization won't be military or technological. Maybe it'll be teaching everyone how to really talk to each other." Zara smiled as she thought about the name they had chosen for their program, the Universal Communication Initiative. It was an ambitious title for an ambitious goal. But she had learned that sometimes the most impossible dreams were the ones most worth pursuing. Outside the station's viewports, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 different worlds, each home to species with their own unique ways of understanding the universe. For the first time in her life, Zara looked at that vast diversity not as a source of division, but as humanity's and her own greatest opportunity to build something better. She was no longer the abandoned girl who carried the weight of a dead species. She was Zara, bridge builder, teacher, and proof that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with words that helped others understand they were never truly alone. out the Vorthak miners she would soon meet. She had studied their language and culture extensively, but always as an academic exercise. Now she would have to put that knowledge to practical use, helping former enemies work alongside their former targets. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had always dreamed of facing, and for the first time in her life, she had someone who believed in her ability to succeed. The sun was setting over Nexus Prime as they left the communications center, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight, Zara was content to walk through a town where she belonged, planning for a future that seemed full of possibilities, of light. Zara closed her eyes and allowed herself to imagine what Nexus Prime might be like. She pictured a place where people judged her by her actions instead of her species, where she could walk through crowds without seeing fear and disgust in every face. Maybe it was foolish to hope for such things, but for the first time in her life, she had someone who believed in her possibility for a better future. And sometimes, that was enough to make the impossible seem within reach. The journey to Nexus Prime would take more than a day, but Zara found herself looking forward to it rather than dreading the destination. Whatever waited for them on that frontier world, she wouldn't face it alone. And that made all the difference.